In the dim vaults of a Virginia Beach archive, long sealed from prying eyes, lies a stenographer's trembling transcript from 1923, a psychic's trance-born warning about the soul's secret destinations, suppressed for decades by those who feared its power to upend our understanding of eternity. What Edgar Cayce glimpsed in the ether could shatter the illusions we cling to about death and the realms beyond. Edgar Cayce, the sleeping prophet of the 20th century, conducted over 14,000 trance readings between the 1920s and 1940s, delving into the Akashic records, the vast cosmic ledger of every soul's odyssey. These sessions, captured verbatim by his devoted stenographer Gladys Davis, were meant to guide the living toward hidden truths. Yet much of this material was buried, overlooked amid the era's skepticism toward the occult, or deliberately hushed by institutions wary of its challenge to conventional spirituality. Cayce himself, a humble photographer by day, entered profound altered states to access forbidden visions, only to emerge with no recollection, leaving Davis to safeguard revelations that blurred the line between mystic insight and existential dread. At the heart of these suppressed transcripts pulses a core discovery: 7 ethereal planes, stratified realms where consciousness lingers between incarnations, each gated by the soul's vibrational essence. Cayce didn't merely sketch these dimensions. In a trance so deep it left witnesses breathless, he charted the invisible forces that assign souls to their post-mortal stations. It's not karma's blind wheel or fate's decree that locks you in. It's the raw frequency of your awareness here and now, forged in the fires of ego, attachment, and unexamined fear. Elevate that frequency in life, he urged, through deliberate acts of surrender and service, and you ascend. Falter, and the lowest planes claim you, a self-imposed exile from divine light. Fade into the haze of one such vision, and the psychological shadows deepen. Cayce's readings expose a harrowing truth. Death isn't an escape but a mirror, reflecting the consciousness you cultivated, or neglected, in flesh. Most souls, he revealed, drift into the densest plane, the earthbound realm, a psychic mire of material obsessions where ego reigns unchecked. Imagine spirits, not as luminous beings, but as spectral echoes, replaying lifetimes of greed and illusion, blind to their stagnation. In a mid-1920s session for an anonymous seeker, Cayce's voice fractured mid-trance, adopting a resonant timbre that chilled the room, an otherworldly echo warning of cycles unbroken. Souls here, he intoned, can languish for eons, mistaking repetition for progress, their psyches fractured by the terror of unrecognized entrapment. Davis's private journals, unearthed years later, recount Cayce's rare agitation upon waking, his face ashen as fragments of the vision lingered, hinting at truths too profound, too unsettling for the conscious mind to bear. This isn't mere mysticism, it's a philosophical reckoning with the illusion of advancement. Conventional wisdom whispers that reincarnation polishes the soul through sheer endurance, lifetime after lifetime. Cayce's forbidden insights dismantle that myth. He chronicled entities reincarnating across millennia, some tracing back to the cataclysm of Atlantis over 12,000 years ago, yet forever tethered to the base frequency, not through malice but inertia. These weren't villains of lore, but everyday wanderers who prioritize fleeting comforts over transcendent growth, fear over empathy, self over the collective soul. Trapped in this psychic limbo, they wander as unwitting phantoms, their consciousness a looped echo, convinced of evolution while devolving into isolation. The intrigue mounts. What if your daily distractions, chasing status, nursing grudges, are the very chains forging your afterlife. Cayce's visions probe this existential rift, urging a confrontation with the self before the veil thins. Yet amid this tension, a speculative glimmer emerges from the edges of his revelations. Perhaps consciousness, after death, doesn't dissolve into void or judgment, but persists as a fluid dreamscape where unresolved earthly patterns replay in infinite variation, allowing the soul a merciful, if haunting, chance to glimpse its own architecture anew, untethered from the body, yet haunted by its echoes. As the echoes of Cayce's voice fade from these hidden pages, one question lingers like a half-remembered dream. If your soul's realm is sealed by today's choices, what unseen door are you barring right now? Fade in. Dimly lit archive room, shadows dancing over dusty file boxes stamped with __, quote _0, __A. Single flickering bulb illuminates a yellowed stenographer's notebook. Soft, ethereal music underscores a voiceover, tense and urgent. Narrator, host, first person, whispered intensity. Imagine stumbling upon a forgotten cassette tape, buried in the vaults of a secretive society, sealed away since the 1940s. It captures the trance voice of Edgar Cayce himself, dictating revelations that could shatter our understanding of the soul's journey beyond death. But why was this transcript suppressed? What hidden truths about consciousness did it hold that powerful interests wanted silenced? This is the lost reading of 1936, rediscovered after decades in obscurity, a psychic's glimpse into realms we're not supposed to access. Smooth transition, cut to black and white photos of Cayce in trance, Gladys Davis poised with pen, 1920s to 1940s. Settings. Narrator shifts to third person, measured tone. Cayce, the sleeping prophet of Virginia Beach, entered altered states thousands of times between the world wars, his words transcribed faithfully by his stenographer Gladys Davis. These weren't mere predictions, they were dives into the Akashic records, unveiling the soul's eternal architecture. Yet, amid his vast archive, certain readings vanished from public view, deemed too disruptive, too revelatory about death's illusions and the consciousness that persists. This 1936 session, intended for a select few seekers, was locked away, its insights on spiritual evolution overshadowed by Cayce's more palatable health diagnostics. Overlooked for challenging the veil between life and afterlife, it whispers of suppressed knowledge that could redefine our existential dread. Transition. Slow zoom on a glowing ethereal mandala, evoking Atlantis ruins submerged in mist. Tone deepens, building intrigue. At the heart of this hidden transcript lies Cayce's core revelation, a mirror to the soul, forged not in crystal, but in the raw encounters of daily life. During the reading, as Cayce emerged from trance, he described a technique drawn from his visions of the afterlife, a method to pierce the fog of physical existence and gauge the frequency of one's consciousness. He urged the seeker, when confronted by another soul who stirs turmoil, be it rage, envy, or terror, pause and reflect. That visceral response is no accident. It's your own unintegrated essence staring back, a psychic echo from realms beyond the grave. The intensity unmasks your current attunement. Swift condemnation signals a material-bound awareness, tethered to the body's fleeting dramas, where death looms as oblivion. Yet, if empathy arises, laced with insight into shared human frailty, you're bridging to subtler planes. Echoes of post-mortem reviews Cayce glimpsed, where souls confront their patterns unbound by flesh. And in the rarest grace, if unconditional regard, blooms for that other's odyssey, mirroring the divine spark in all, you've touched Christ consciousness, the pinnacle, he revealed, that souls reclaim fully upon crossing into eternity, free from earthly distortions. This mirror, Cayce insisted in the transcript, was his tool for discerning readiness among disciples, separating those mired in ego's shadows from souls primed for ascension. Its precision, drawn from interdimensional scrutiny, exposed how death isn't an end, but a recalibration, amplifying whatever frequency we cultivate here. Transition. Fade to underwater visions of Atlantis, shimmering crystals pulsing with light. Psychological tension builds, existential depth intensifies. From this foundation, Cayce's trance wove a profound expansion, delving into the psychological labyrinth of human evolution and its ties to forgotten epochs. In hypnotic detail, he affirmed the seeker's Atlantean origins, not as myth, but as verifiable soul memory from a cataclysm-shattered civilization. There, amid crystalline technologies that harness pure consciousness, souls operated at elevations we moderns can scarcely fathom, merging mind with universal intelligence, transcending the terror of mortality, the forbidden twist. These advanced entities, glimpsed in Cayce's afterlife visions as luminous collectives, volunteered for rebirth in our era. Between 1900 and 2000, legions incarnated, their latent recollections intact, mission-bound, to infuse Earth with elevated vibrations. Walking among us, they embody millennia-advanced awareness, their presence a covert catalyst for planetary awakening. Cayce's words, laced with urgency, warned of the psychological rift. Ordinary minds, haunted by death's finality, resist this hidden influx, mistaking it for delusion. Yet these Atlantean echoes force us to question, are our existential anxieties mere veils, concealing our own dormant godhood? He elaborated on universal laws, practical anchors to propel any soul skyward in one lifetime, bypassing reincarnation's slow grind. Foremost was selfless service, not superficial charity, but a radical reorientation. Every choice, from dawn's first breath to midnight's regrets, as a forge for the spirit. Ego's clamor pulls toward isolation, amplifying the illusion of solitary death. Soul's whisper aligns with collective ascent, easing the transition to undying awareness. Cayce pierced modern illusions too, confronting America's wealth obsession as a psychic trap. In trance, he mourned souls who, in prior, pauper incarnations, soared spiritually, only to regress amid fortunes that bloated the self. Material gain, untethered from purpose, fractures consciousness, breeding separation that haunts the deathbed, a psychological echo chamber of unfulfilled longing. But aligned with mission, abundance becomes a conduit, lifting frequencies toward the harmonious realms post-mortem. The second law unfurled is thought's creative potency. Each mental ripple, Cayce revealed, sculpts not just circumstance, but the soul's eternal blueprint. Beyond rote positivity, he stressed vigilant discernment, negating fear's undercurrents that bind us to lower densities where death devours identity. In his visions, unchecked thoughts manifested as post-life barriers, replaying like spectral chains until dissolved in higher light. Transition. Ethereal glow fades to cosmic void, stars whispering secrets. Tone turns reflective, adding speculative layer. In this suppressed dialogue, Cayce hinted at deeper mysteries untouched by his public canon. Speculating on the afterlife's threshold, he envisioned consciousness not extinguishing, but fragmenting into review, souls sifting through incarnate veils and Akashic halls where unhealed shadows manifest as dreamlike trials. One overlooked insight: those attuned to Christ frequencies might glimpse parallel afterlives during near-death glimpses, bridging worlds while embodied, blurring the line between here and hereafter in a psychic prelude to true liberation. Transition. Slow fade out, return to archive vault, notebook closing. Shadowily. Narrator back to first person, provocative close. As I pored over this clandestine record, Cayce's voice echoed a final challenge. What if your every reaction today is scripting tomorrow's eternity? In a world suppressing such truths, dare you gaze into the mirror and see the immortal self staring back? In the dim glow of a single desk lamp, late into the night of 1942, Edgar Cayce's voice, trance-induced and otherworldly, echoed through Gladys Davis's typewriter keys. But what she captured that evening wasn't just another health reading or prophecy. It was a forbidden glimpse into the soul's hidden architecture, a revelation so profound it was sealed away in the association's archives, overlooked for decades amid fears it would shatter conventional beliefs about life, death, and the unseen threads binding all consciousness. This lost transcript, pieced together from suppressed notes, unveils Cayce's visions of realms beyond the veil, visions that challenge everything we assume about our eternal journey. To understand the weight of these words, we must step back to the man himself. Edgar Cayce, the __1__, lived from 1877 to 1945, a humble photographer from Kentucky who, without formal training, entered altered states of consciousness to deliver over 14,000 psychic readings between the 1920s and 1940s. Guided by what he called the __2, an ethereal library of all human experience, his trance sessions, meticulously transcribed by his stenographer Gladys Davis, covered everything from lost civilizations to personal healings. Yet not all were shared. Certain readings, like those delving into the afterlife's mechanics, were buried deep in private files, dismissed as too esoteric or risky in an era dominated by materialist science and rigid religious doctrines. Why? Because Cayce's insights didn't just predict futures. They exposed the soul's raw mechanics, suggesting death isn't an end, but a deliberate pivot point in collective evolution, a truth that could upend societies built on fear of the unknown. At the heart of this suppressed archive lies Cayce's core revelation, the interconnected web of consciousness, where personal shadows and light ripple outward, reshaping not just your destiny, but humanity's. Drawing from visions beyond the physical, he saw souls ensnared not by sins or virtues alone, but by unhealed fractures in their awareness. Positive affirmations, he warned in trance, could mask these wounds, trapping spirits in a limbo of false enlightenment. True ascent demands a fiercer path, what Cayce termed purification through unflinching truth. Imagine a soul, radiant yet fractured, confronting its buried angers, shames, and illusions under the unyielding gaze of universal light. Only by embracing these shadows without judgment, loving the flawed self in full, does the gateway to higher realms crack open. This evolves into a deeper psychological labyrinth, healing as an act of cosmic service. Cayce's altered states revealed a startling unity, all minds linked in an invisible lattice, where one soul's mending sends shock waves through the collective. Fade to a vision he described. A man heals his long-held resentment toward a betrayer, and across oceans and lifetimes, unseen barriers dissolve in strangers, easing their hidden burdens. Fear's grip loosens globally when you face yours. Shame's chains break for the species when you claim your own. This isn't solitary striving, it's a planetary alchemy. Every choice for compassion over division, every release of grudge tugs the entire human tapestry toward elevated frequencies. Cayce's eyes, upon waking from such revelations, would often well with urgency, as if glimpsing the butterfly effect of a single forgiven slight. Yet the transcript's pivot, the element that sealed its fate in obscurity, centers on forgiveness as the ultimate arbiter of spiritual access. In 1942, amid World War's shadows, Cayce channeled that no deeds, rituals, or wisdoms suffice without this radical release, not the superficial pardon laced with lingering spite, but a profound, Christ-like surrender, seeing others not as enemies, but as mirrors of limited awareness, deserving compassion precisely because they falter. He estimated fewer than 1 in 100 souls grasped this, mistaking suppression for absolution. Drawing from the Akashic haze, Cayce illustrated with a real case, veiled in his notes to protect identities. Transition to 1938. In a modest Virginia Beach parlor, Gladys Davis's keys clattered as Cayce entered trance for a distraught woman abandoned by her husband for another. Rage consumed her. She sought cosmic vengeance for the ruin of her family. But Cayce's voice, ethereal and firm, reframed her pain as a soul's forge. Her husband's betrayal, he said, was no accident, a karmic catalyst thrusting her toward mastery or victimhood. True forgiveness, offered not as reward, but as liberation for her own spirit, would catapult her through realms otherwise barred. She toiled for 2 years under his guidance, unraveling layers of bitterness until release bloomed, raw and transformative. Follow-up visions confirmed it. Her essence leapt from the second astral plane, a realm of unrest, to the fifth, a luminous sphere of unity, a ascent spanning lifetimes and mere years. The ripple? Mere months later, her ex-husband emerged from isolation, awakened by an inexplicable inner call, seeking reconciliation without knowledge of her inner work. Cayce nodded knowingly upon hearing this. Consciousness, he affirmed, defies time's chains. Your evolution echoes backward and forward, inviting even past life kin to rise. This interconnected dance underscores his fourth law. Death not as oblivion, but a conscious threshold. Souls attuned to higher vibrations orchestrate their passage, lingering in lucidity, preserving identity, even selecting future incarnations with purposeful intent. Lower realms, however, deliver chaos, a disoriented flailing into forgetfulness, haunted by unresolved echoes. As the transcript fades into speculative depths, Cayce's visions hint at something uncharted, yet aligned with his cosmic map. Post-death consciousness as a momentary fusion with the universal oversoul, where the individual self dissolves into a boundless review of all timelines, tasting infinite alternate paths not taken. A disorienting ecstasy that reshapes the soul's next blueprint, whispering possibilities we glimpse only in dreams. What if the key to unlocking your own hidden realms lies not in escaping death's mystery, but in forgiving the life it interrupts, questioning ultimately how many barriers we've built that keep eternity just out of reach? In the shadowed vaults of a forgotten Kentucky archive, a stenographer's trembling hand captured words that could unravel the fabric of reality itself. For decades, these transcripts, scribed in the 1920s and 30s, under the trance-induced gaze of Edgar Cayce, languished in secrecy, deemed too disruptive by those guarding the gates of conventional thought. What visions did Cayce glimpse in his self-induced altered states that authorities sought to bury? A lost revelation on the soul's navigation through death, whispered only in these suppressed sessions, now emerges from the dust? Edgar Cayce, the renowned sleeping prophet, wasn't born with the keys to the unseen. He forged them through rigorous discipline in the early 20th century amid the roar of two world wars and the dawn of modern skepticism. From 1901 until his death in 1945, he delivered over 14,000 psychic readings, entering deep trance states to access the Akashic records, an ethereal library of all human experience. But why was this material overlooked, even hidden? In an era dominated by emerging science and rigid theology, Cayce's insights into consciousness and the afterlife challenged the very foundations of mortality. His stenographer, Gladys Davis, meticulously documented these sessions in private, away from prying eyes, as revelations poured forth that blurred the lines between body, soul, and eternity. These weren't mere predictions. They were forbidden blueprints for transcending death's veil, suppressed lest they ignite a revolution in how we perceive our existence. At the heart of these concealed transcripts lies Cayce's core revelation, the illusion of time as a barrier to eternal consciousness. In a 1930s reading pulled from the ether during one of his profound visions, Cayce described how souls attuned to higher vibrations pierce the temporal shroud, entering what he termed the eternal now. Here, past burdens dissolve, future fears evaporate, and the present pulses with boundless creative force. No longer chained by linear regret or anticipation, the aware soul wields influence across timelines, guiding reincarnations, communing with discarnate entities, even shaping probable destinies. Cayce himself embodied this during his trances, channeling knowledge from ancient Atlantis to unborn eras, proving it wasn't innate clairvoyance, but a cultivated state, accessible through disciplined inner attunement. Yet this power came with a stark warning. Those souls mired in denser earthly attachments often wander oblivious in liminal shadows, unaware of their passing, trapped in earthbound confusion for years, their heavy consciousness barring ascent to luminous realms. Death, in Cayce's view, isn't an end but a threshold. Trauma for the unprepared, liberation for the evolved. As we delve deeper into these archived visions, the psychological intrigue intensifies, pulling us into Cayce's existential labyrinth. Imagine the tension of a soul confronting its own dissolution, not as oblivion, but as a mirror reflecting unhealed fractures in awareness. Cayce's trances revealed death as a psychological pivot, where consciousness confronts its illusions, material densities that anchor us to forgotten pains, regrets that echo like unresolved archetypes in the mind's hidden chambers. In one suppressed 1941 session, he expanded on this, urging preparation not through ritual, but through vigilant inner work, elevating frequency via compassionate service, forgiveness as a blade against ego's chains. This isn't abstract philosophy, it's a blueprint for intentional rebirth, where the soul, freed from lower traumas, retains memory and volition, steering its next earthly form with purpose. The forbidden allure of these transcripts lies in their practicality. Every thought, every act of love frequencies your vibration, transforming death from chaotic drift into conscious voyage. Fade in now to the chamber's hush, where Cayce's voice, channeled through trance, echoes the soul's quiet rebellion against finality. Yet amid these documented depths, an unspoken speculation lingers, aligned with Cayce's cosmic visions. What if consciousness, post-death, doesn't merely persist, but merges into a collective oversoul, a vast, interconnected web where individual essences dissolve into universal knowing? In this speculative realm, the departed don't isolate in solitary afterlives. They amplify the whole, seeding intuitive flashes in the living, a hidden inheritance of wisdom, felt as sudden epiphanies or déjà vu, drawing humanity toward collective awakening? These unearthed words from Cayce's hidden legacy compel us to pause. If time is but a veil, and your soul's trajectory hinges on choices veiled in the now, what unseen realm are you truly navigating? And will you dare to claim its light before the final breath? In the shadowed vaults of forgotten archives, a single cassette tape lay buried for decades, sealed away after Edgar Cayce's death in 1945. Recorded in the 1930s during one of his deepest trance states, this lost session whispers revelations about the soul's journey beyond the veil, truths so profound they were deemed too dangerous for the public eye. What if the sleeping prophet unlocked doors to consciousness that those in power vowed to keep shut forever? To understand the gravity of this hidden transcript, we must step back into the life of Edgar Cayce, the man known as the Sleeping Prophet. Born in 1877 in rural Kentucky, Cayce was no ordinary mystic. A devout Christian photographer by trade, he stumbled into his gifts around 1901 after a throat ailment left him speechless, until, in a self-induced hypnotic trance, he diagnosed and healed himself. From the 1920s through the 1940s, in thousands of readings conducted across America, Cayce would recline on a couch, close his eyes, and enter an altered state, his voice channeling insights on health history and the human spirit. Attended by his faithful stenographer, Gladys Davis, these sessions were meticulously transcribed, forming the basis of the Association for Research and Enlightenment. Yet not all records saw the light of day. Select tapes, including this one, were locked in private collections, overshadowed by Cayce's more palatable prophecies on Atlantis or holistic healing. Why? Insiders whispered of content that blurred the lines between science and the supernatural, challenging the era's rigid views on death and the afterlife, views held by religious institutions and emerging psychological establishments alike, suppressed not by malice but by a collective fear that such knowledge might unravel the illusions we cling to in waking life. Fade to the dim glow of a 1937 reading room in Virginia Beach, the air thick with the scent of old paper and unspoken expectancy. Gladys Davis, her pencil poised, captures Cayce's voice as it emerges from the depths, a core revelation on the interconnected web of souls. In this forbidden archive, Cayce describes consciousness not as isolated sparks in the void, but as threads in an eternal tapestry. The entity, he intones in trance, enters the earthly plane not alone, but as part of the universal mind. Each thought, each act, rippling through the Akashic records, binding the living to the departed. Here death is no endpoint, but a threshold where individual awareness merges back into the cosmic whole. Cayce reveals visions of souls reviewing their incarnations, not in judgment, but in compassionate synthesis, understanding how one life's choices echo into the collective evolution of humanity. This wasn't mere spiritual platitude, it was a psychic blueprint for why we feel inexplicable pulls toward strangers, why forgiveness heals not just the giver, but the giver's entire lineage across lifetimes. The suppression stemmed from this. If every soul's healing uplifts the whole, what becomes of systems built on division and control? As the tape unspools further, we delve into the philosophical undercurrents that haunted Cayce himself. In his waking hours, he grappled with the psychological intrigue of these transborn truths, existential tensions that mirrored the inner worlds of Jungian archetypes or Freudian shadows, yet transcended them. Cayce envisioned death as a symbolic rebirth, a plunge into hidden realms where consciousness confronts its illusions. Service to others, he reflected in reconstructed notes from private journals, is the soul's natural outflow, not a bid for divine favor, but the very pulse of awakened awareness. Imagine the prophet awakening from a session, eyes wide with the weight of forbidden visions, altered states where he wandered ethereal planes, witnessing how suppressed knowledge, like the soul's innate power to evolve through love, threatens the ego's grip on reality. This isn't abstract philosophy, it's a psychic investigation into why we trigger one another. Those raw encounters serving as compasses toward deeper self-knowing. Cayce's revelations deepen the intrigue. In the afterlife's vast inner worlds, consciousness doesn't dissolve. It expands, revealing how our daily choices forge pathways, not just for ourselves, but for the unseen chorus of souls awaiting reunion. The tension builds here, in the silence between readings. Did Cayce fear his own revelations, knowing they invited scrutiny from skeptics who labeled him a fraud, or from believers who couldn't bear the responsibility of collective destiny? Yet amid these echoes from the archive, one speculative thread emerges, unspoken in Cayce's documented sessions but aligned with his trance logic. What if consciousness after death lingers as a subtle resonance, influencing the living through dreams and synchronicities? Not ghosts in the machine, but quiet mentors guiding the evolution of those still veiled in flesh. A hidden harmony ensuring no soul's wisdom is ever truly lost. As the tape hisses to its end, Cayce's voice fades, leaving us suspended in the mystery. If every choice you make today rewrites the collective script of human awakening, what hidden truths are you ready to unearth? And what veils will you dare to lift?